there would be more brutality, more hitting of Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure, rather than any actions or a counteroffensive on the battlefield.
The head of GCHQ will say today that Ukraine is turning the tide against exhausted Russian forces. So Jeremy Fleming will say that Moscow is running out of ammunition. Is that how it seems in Ukraine, where cities were hit by missile attacks yesterday? Alexandra Khara is a former advisor for the Ministry of Defence of Ukraine and is in Kiev now. Good morning to you, Alexander.
Good morning.
I am hoping, my fingers are crossed, that it has been a quiet morning in Kiev.
Well, it was pretty quiet, even though there was one air siren this morning. But I've seen news that Zaporizhia region was hit by the Russian shelling. And then it's just, it's sort of an oxymoron, because Zaporizhia was annexed by Russia, illegally annexed by Russia. So they are shelling their own territory. It's a bit Orwellian logic there.
Why do you think, Alexander, that, obviously we are relieved that the attacks were not worse than they were, but if Vladimir Putin was as angry as we are led to believe about the attack on the bridge into Crimea, why did he not exact a worse revenge? Do you think that is because he is playing some kind of game, a long game, or is that because they are actually running out of weapons and they are exhausted?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with Mr. Kirby, who yesterday at the briefing said that the Russians had been planning this attack before the carriage bridge, I would call it, rather than Crimean, was blown up. Secondly, there are at least three goals of Russians of this Russian missile attack on Ukraine. First and foremost, Mr. Putin has lost strategically this war, and he is under the heavy criticism, even in Russia, where there is a censorship on everything being said. There is a growing dissatisfaction of those fascists, the Russian fascists and the Russian hawks, that he's waging this war in more soft ways than he should have done. So he tried to please it. Secondly, he is trying to break Ukrainian will to resist, and just it's not going to work. Our president, and I agree completely with him, and a lot of my friends agree with him, that Ukraine is not going to give up. Only for several hours of yesterday, during this attack, Ukrainians collected some $6 million of donations for UAVs and some other equipment for our armed forces. So we are not, blaming Ukrainian government, Ukrainian armed forces for what they are doing and pushing our government to negotiate with Russia. Vice versa, we are pushing our government to fight back Russians. So right. they are failing here. And certainly the key goal of this attack was to deter the Western support, and particularly that of Germany. They are hesitant. They are not going. They are not interested in providing us with main battle tanks, FEVs, and other things.
Okay.
So this is not just about rage and not about the carriage bridge.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the aspects of the situation there that you mentioned, which is that there are certain people within the Russian military who feel that Vladimir Putin should have gone harder. He has appointed General Sergei Surovkin. Now, for people who don't know, he's the architect of Aleppo's destruction. Will that make a difference, or is that just ticking a box? Because you can appoint all the people you want in the world, but if you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the weapons, then it's not going to make much of a difference.
Well, they still have a lot of armaments back from the Soviet Union, and our army captured a lot of tanks and artillery with 1950s, 1960s. So they are serving everything that's at their disposal. So they can make a harm to us. But if you are talking about precision guided weapons, like we've seen attack yesterday, certainly they cannot use all of this stockpile, because in the first place, this was designed and stockpiled for the war with NATO, with the West. So certainly they cannot employ everything that they have. So we don't believe that they are capable of any real action within this half of a year time frame. They are not capable of gathering enough manpower. You've seen that when they declared this partial mobilization, more people fled the country rather than subscribe for the Russian army. So there would be more brutality, more hitting of Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure, rather than any actions or a counteroffensive on the battlefield.
Okay, Alexander, thank you very much. It's really interesting. Alexander
you.
Khara, former advisor for the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, who is in Kiev.